Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with Pro Wrestling Logic YouTube channel and the Payback 2020 review. Interesting show for a number of reasons. Some good stuff. Overall, as it relates to the average WWE Network, I guess you'd say, free per-view show, this was eventful enough that it matters, but nothing that couldn't have been drawn out another few weeks or whatever. I don't know why they did it so close together. I assume it's because Roman Reigns returned and they wanted to jumpstart a story with him, I guess. But anyway, so we open with the pre-show match. The pre-show is in fact Liv Morgan and Ruby Riott defeating the Iconics. I've mentioned before, I will mention again, I do not understand the Iconics being employed. I don't see what other people see in them. Anyway, slow-paced match, drags a bit. I like Liv Morgan a lot, always have. Ruby Riott, I'm hit and miss with, depends on who she's with. The Iconics I don't see. Morgan takes an early advantage, and Riott chases Peyton Royce around, and then they cut her off. They cut Riott off from her partner. Billie Kay tries to convince Morgan that she's been hit, and then they do a hot tag for Morgan. She goes nuts, and then they do double foot stomp for near fall, and then Morgan drags Riott to her corner, and then counter the deja vu. Finish came when Morgan hits double knees on Kay for the pin. They do a, I guess, backstage interview at a point where they say the Riott Cards is officially back together. I think we already knew that. We go to the main show, Bobby Lashley with MVP and Shelton Benjamin defeating Apollo Crews to win the U.S. Championship. It's about time with this. Lashley and Crews do have a nice opening match. Slower pace than I imagined it to be. They dragged it a little longer than is necessary. MVP promises that Lashley's going to win and make Crews a permanent stay-at-home dad. They start with really basic stuff. Standing drop kick by Crews. It looks like he missed by a mile on one of the drop kicks he hits. I think it was the second one. Anyway, Crews avoids Lashley, and Lashley gets hit with a standing moonsault off the apron by Crews, and MVP and Benjamin do get in the face of their adversary. Lashley follows up with a fallaway slam and a shoulder tackle in the corner. Lashley attempts a suplex. Crews slips to the back. Doesn't go anywhere with that. It's an enziguri. Lashley quickly recovers and hits the Dominator for the near fall. And then we go to let's see, Crews firing up and hits a wild comeback, hits a splash in the corner for near fall there too. Crews attempts a fresh slam and slips and hits a full Nelson. Crews avoids getting hit with a German suplex. Lashley jumps up to his feet. Crews hits a second German suplex and follows up with a big splash for near fall. Lashley recovers, slams Crews hard, and then hits a full Nelson for the championship win. Heels celebrate post with the championship. Then they do a recap of Roman Reigns signing his contract. Braxton tries to interview Paul Heyman. Heyman says unless it's about his personal business or not about his personal business, she needs to go away. She tries to see Roman Reigns. He says no. Keith Lee is in the locker room getting ready for his match. And then JBL says that it'll change Lee's career if he wins, but if not, he shouldn't feel bad. Big E and Sheamus um, is up next. Really, really slow match. I don't really understand why they did this other than to fill time. Sheamus with an early advantage uses forearms. Big E fights back. Sheamus regains control. Sheamus slows the pace to a crawl. Big E fights back, but there's a backbreaker by Sheamus, and then Sheamus continues to work over the leg and applies a half crab. Big E fights out of the hold. Sheamus quickly takes back over. Sheamus jumps up to the top, but Big E caught him and hit a belly-to-belly suplex. Follows up with a second suplex. Big E recovers but starts dancing. Then they trade shots in the middle of the ring. Sheamus regains control, works over Big E's injured knee, fires up with a running spear through the ropes. On the apron, Big E attempted the big ending. Sheamus went back to the injured knee. Big E jumped to his feet. Sheamus rocks him with a knee to the jaw. Near fall there. Sheamus attempts the brogue kick, but ends up hitting the big ending for the win. Again, a completely throwaway match that isn't necessary. Elise Ashton interviews Matt Riddle. He promises to defeat Corbin and take his crown. She asks for his reaction to Corbin tweeting. Riddle smiled, faded when he was asked if he was a failure in the ring, like he was a failure at home. In the back, which is just, why are they bringing his personal life into things? Nia and Shayna Baszler are in each other's faces, and they stop arguing long enough to get ready for the match. Riddle and Corbin had a passable match, but at the same time, and I've said this from the beginning, I'm not a fan of Corbin being used in this role. Riddle has a relatively short shelf life and is being wasted. Corbin jumps Riddle before the match begins. Riddle's firmly in control. Corbin slows the pace. Riddle recovers and locks on a sleeper. There's a fallback by Corbin to break the hold. Corbin tosses Riddle across the ring to break the hold and gets a clothesline for a near fall. Corbin slows the pace back down and hits a back elbow, gets another near fall. Riddle hits a running forearms in the corner, hits a Broton and a running knee for a near fall of his own. Corbin recovers and hits a deep six for another near fall. Riddle fights back and applies an armbar. He follows up with a bro to sleep and a floating bro for the win. I mean, I'm glad that my initial thought was I'm glad this is over. Then Riddle goes to do an interview where he says he's happy that it's over too, and Corbin jumps in from behind, so I guess they're continuing this. Again, Riddle is a guy that I would put Intercontinental title, sure. SmackDown title, I would, but they're committed to Reigns, but definitely. Raw title, maybe. Like, I would be building a brand around Riddle regardless of where I put him, whether it's a secondary championship and then you move him up, or a brand championship and whatever. Riddle has so much of an upside. Anyway, Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax defeat Sasha Banks and Bayley to win the tag team championships. It moves the Bayley and Sasha story along. I guess it moves the tension between Shayna and Nia along too. Story of the match is that the new champions hate each other and can't get along. Nia tells Baszler to follow her lead. Baszler tags herself into the match. Baszler goes after Banks, trips her in the corner, and kicks her in the head quite a few times. Banks tags Bayley in, but Baszler throws Banks to the floor. Banks grabs Jack's legs, causes a distraction. Bayley gets an advantage for a bit. Heels are briefly in control, although I would call all four of these heels the more I think about it. Jax tosses Banks into the barricade on the outside quite a few times. Then Jax dominates the match until Banks hits a chop block. Um, Bailey and Banks isolate Jax for several minutes, and then Jax takes control of the match on her own. Jax attempts a leg drop. Bailey uh, tags back in and then hits a running knee. Baszler and Jax gets some uh, heat on Paige. Jax attempts a powerbomb. Banks counters. Bailey hits a flying elbow on Jax and knocks Baszler off the apron. Banks then hits a frog splash on Jax for a near fall. Um, and then there's a blind tag. Finish comes when Baszler applies a Muda lock on Banks and a Coquina clutch on Bailey at the same time. Shayna Baszler looks like a monster here. Bailey eventually has to uh, um, tap out or there's eventually a submission victory, um, and ultimately Banks and Bailey are no longer your champions. Your new champions are Baszler and Jax. I guess they're going to continue the teasing dissension thing. Charlie Caruso attempts to interview Baszler and Jax. They celebrate like crazy. Well, Jax does anyway. And Baszler pointed out they're still not friends. And Bailey and Banks were devastated that they had lost. I assume this will move towards a breakup, maybe a match at Survivor Series. Keith Lee defeats Randy Orton. I wish they'd done this on Raw with his start, but I guess they do the payoff here. Match was shorter than I would have liked, but very basic. Orton applies the headlock and immediately starts the match. Lee uses his power throughout the entire match, but especially during the early stages. And Lee hits one of his cross bodies. And then there's a series of chops by Orton. Lee fights back, traps Orton in the corner. Lee misses a charge, goes shoulder first into the ring post. Orton takes advantage here, slows the pace down with a chin lock. And then they go to the floor. Lee gives Orton a back suplex on the announce table. Orton recovers and catches Lee with the draping DDT in the ring. Orton finally in control, and Orton attempts an RKO, but manages to hit a spirit bomb and get the win. They push this as the biggest win of Lee's career, and I would agree. In the back, Caleb Braxton again approaches Paul Heyman. Heyman again reiterates that Reigns will win the championship. And then we go to the semi-main event, Rey and Dominic Mysterio against Seth Rollins and Murphy. Rey tees starting the match, but Dominic runs in, jumps the heels, gains an early advantage. But the heels turn that quickly. Dominic fights and hits a springboard arm drag on Rollins. Rollins is frustrated, tags in Murphy. Rey competes with an eye patch, which I guess is a nod to their former story, and land on Murphy's knee. They isolate Rey in the corner for quite a bit. Rey fights back, tags in Dominic. Dominic hits a cross body, but the heels caught him. Rollins hits a Falcon Arrow for a close near fall. Here, heels regain control on Dominic and cut him off again. Dominic fights back, sets up Murphy and sends him into the barricade. Dominic avoids Rollins, and Rollins crashes in the barricade. Dominic fights back. Rey gets a hot tag. Rey hits a moonsault for near fall. Attempts a 619. Rollins avoids it. Rey gets another series of near falls here. Dominic catches Murphy with a tornado DDT. Rollins takes over with the sling blade and hits a seated. Rey hits a seated senton, but Rollins counters with a backbreaker. Dominic and Murphy brawl around ringside, and there's a dive. Rey attempts a crossbody. Rollins hits double knees to the ribs. Rollins hits a super kick for a near fall. I mean, they're really telling a decent story here. Dominic and Murphy continue going. Rollins attempts curb stomped, but Rey counters, and Dominic makes the save for his dad here. Um, Rollins then attempts a running powerbomb into a kick from Murphy. Ray counters with a Rana, and Murphy kicks Rollins. Ray hits 619 on Murphy. Dominic hits a frog splash for the win. They tease dissension between Rollins and Murphy post-match. And then we go to a no-holds-barred triple threat. Roman Reigns with Paul Heyman defeating The Fiend, Bray Wyatt, and Braun Strowman for the Universal Championship. I'm not a fan of Reigns being back on top. I get that he's the guy they want to build around. I do think turning him heel is a good idea. I don't know that they have enough faces on SmackDown to give Reigns a decent opponent, but that'll return, and we'll see what's there. Probably the Heyman Reigns alliance has the most potential of anything that's there. Reigns doesn't sign the contract until he's walking through the curtain, and he doesn't even sign up for the first half of the match. Strowman and The Fiend go one-on-one for most of the match. This causes it to drag a bit. Fiend makes his entrance and posed with Braun Strowman, jumps him in the dark. Strowman scores a near fall, and Fiend fights back. He hits a Sister Abigail for a near fall of his own. Fiend slams Strowman through the announce table at ringside, and he uses a giant mallet. Yes, I can't believe I'm saying that. Fiend does end up hitting him in the chest with it. Rocks Strowman with the steel steps. Alexa Bliss is in a trance watching all of this. They fight around the stage. Fiend is on the screen. Fiend attempts Sister Abigail. Strowman fights back and tackles the Fiend off the stage. Back in the ring, Strowman climbed to the top. Fiend cut him off. Fiend gave Strowman a superplex. The ring implodes, and referee falls in the process. Roman Reigns music hits at this moment. Roman signs the contract also at this moment, and he tries to pin both guys. Reigns grabs a chair, destroys Strowman for a near fall. Fiend locked on the mandible claw. Reigns hits a low blow to break the hold. Reigns jumps back in the rings, hits a spear on Strowman to win the championship. This is probably the most heelish a guy has been. I'm actually intrigued on the Heyman-related promo on SmackDown. First thing that's intrigued me about SmackDown in at least a year, if not longer. Anyway, like I said, a relatively uneventful program, but also they did move some stories along. They could have waited, but they didn't, and that's what you get. Raw is tonight also going to have at least half a dozen or so episodes of the 1983 World Class Series up today. So stay tuned and keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment.